Hi, I'm Tyler Iverson, the director of Project Moses. I'm here with Phil and Donna Waldron, the co-founders of Mission Upreach. The vision for Project Moses is something that's existed longer than Mission Upreach. Can you tell me about that history?
Yeah, for me, it's really an exciting story about how God works through many different people over many different, in this case, 2 decades to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. And the easiest way to explain the story is there was a man named Phil Davidson that lived here, and he and his brother, they're both from Canada, just had a burning desire to have a project where they would train young men to be godly men. They named it the Moses Project because they had a vision of training young men just like Moses was trained in the house of Pharaoh, the best possible education and civil law, warfare, government administration, every type of training that one would need to lead a nation. And he didn't even know why God was doing it at the time, but years later he found out. So that was their dream, and that was roughly 20 years ago from today. And in 2015, 10 years ago, Phil and his family had moved back to Alberta, Canada, and it just became very difficult for him to manage the project from Alberta. And they looked for someone to take the project over, and they approached us. And of course, we felt like it was a perfect match. And we were doing many of the same things, just along a different parallel. And now we're 10 years later, and we're more excited than ever to be a part of what God's doing in the lives of these young men.
As the project has developed under your stewardship, what have you seen be the kind of end goal, the end result that you want to produce?
Our goal is to, and it's, I think, the original goal that Phil and Tim Davidson had when they founded the Moses Project. And we want to produce men who will transform their nation, their communities, and their nation. We believe the best way to do that is raise them up in the Lord. Not all of our young men become Christians, but when they leave our program, they believe in the values and they have the character of a Christian who serves Jesus as Lord, whether they acknowledge him as their Lord or not.
Going forward, do you see a vision of the future that's different from what it is now for Project Moses?
Of course, we want to get to our maximum, which is, I tell everybody it's 50, I think I heard you the other day say it was 43 or so, but somewhere in that 45, 50. If we need to, we'll build more dormitories. But, our goal would be maximize that. And probably 50 is a good number because, since you're with them all day, every day, they're part of what we are doing is the personal mentoring and discipleship that takes place. And at some point it becomes an institution. I can't see us doing this with 500 young men at a time. We might could get there, but it's probably going to be after my lifetime before we could get there. But we don't want to dilute that discipleship that's taking place as a very personal thing. So I would say overarching goal, no, we wouldn't change a thing. And again, I think we're on the trajectory that Phil and Tim Davidson put us on even before we even knew them. And there are things that we would like to do, additional things. We would like for our boys to have access to economic opportunities when they leave our program. That's so important that a man here can have a business or a job that allows him to support and sustain his family. That's one of the things that's feeding this massive wave of illegal immigration to the States. It's in search of economic opportunity, and we must help them combat that because it's a very real need. So I would say within those two dynamics, one of producing men who are going to transform their country from within for the better, being disciples of Jesus, and giving them ample access to economic opportunity are probably the two driving forces, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective of kind of the scale movement of trying to get to our full capacity to what could be 50 boys, but maintaining the real fellowship and discipleship that can happen in a smaller group, in a more felt brotherhood. Because I'd say one of my desires is to see the true brotherhood amongst the boys, and then my role as the authority figure is to apply the discipline necessary to young lives for them to get to the point where, like you said, whether they make this step in faith to be a Christian or not, we still are committed to their development and committed to their success in the future. How do you view vocation as a part of the kingdom work?
Well, yeah, I think the church for centuries has, in human thinking, has divided spiritual from secular. Is a term I grew up with, and I remember reading years ago the life history of Hudson Taylor, who was a missionary in China for years and years and years, pretty much most of his life. And he said, Jesus is either Lord of all or he's not Lord of all. And it just really struck me that he's the Lord of work. And, we see God in the garden, in the creation of the world, he's working. And then it says he rested, and he assigned Adam, our forefather, work, and it was honorable. Getting your fingers in the dirt and getting dirty in the process of working is noble and good. So I think we need to communicate that value, because I think that's God works, and we're made in his image, and we're to be working. Ephesians 2:8-10, it says we were created for good works. So we need to be about good works. So to me, advocation and vocation, they both should serve God. Whatever God's called you to do, gifted you to do, or in some cases, he plants us in a place where we have to respond and do something, and we really don't have the talent for doing it, but he equips us to do it. So I think that's another aspect of, looking around, seeing what needs to be done and getting to work. We're big proponents of working. We love working, and we love being a part of what God is doing, working here. So,
yeah, I'd say one of my desires is to see the boys, really a wider range of boys be able to have access to what we're offering. Currently, with the system as we have it coordinated, we're utilizing a great school here in Santa Rosa, but we're kind of limited to those who we can give a true holistic education to, because the requirements to participate in that school are pretty demanding, as well as people's inclinations aren't always to a formal education versus vocational education or a tech school. Mm-hmm. So one of my desires, one of my dreams would be to see that develop. And I know you have similar thoughts, and it's happened previously as well at the project. But how do you view a future where there is kind of more independence of the project, by way of education or tech school education?
Yeah, well, going back to what Phil Davidson was able to do, he utilized a program that was coordinated by the municipality, the mayor's office, and we continued that when we took it, but the quality of that program really diminished. I don't know if it was lack of funding or emphasis or whatever. Our guys would show up and the teacher wouldn't show up. Or he would show up and he'd pop in a video and go away, and it just was a waste of time. And so we lost faith in that. It's something we probably ought to look at again. But during that time, we actually began dreaming about creating our own vocational school out there, because we have a welding shop, we have a carpentry shop. And just those two vocations, we wouldn't have to invest anything in infrastructure. we would just need to be able to pay the salaries of the people who have the ability to teach that. So I would say that ought to be pretty high on our wish list for finding funding, is being able to return to that. We have talked about having our own school, a formal school. We've actually looked into that and invested some money in, finding out exactly what we would need to do. I'm talking about future. I'm ambivalent on whether we keep using the school we have, and we've tried every high school in town, and we've landed on this one. It's the best, and it's a large one. It's very rigorous, and like a private school, and in spite of being a public school. And we know a lot of really good graduates that have come out of there. There is a social aspect. We want our boys to, I don't want them to be in a monastery-like environment where they're insulated from the local community. That's part of what, being salt and light. We want to build these young men into godly men so that they can have an impact in the community. And I think being in El Alvaro, the school that they're in now, is, at least for the foreseeable future, I think that's the best way to accomplish that. But definitely on the trade side, I think everybody needs to learn a trade. I came up working in the housing industry and then later in commercial construction. And my first job when I left college was as a superintendent for a commercial project. So we have supported our family at times when, I lost a job. I went to work on a framing crew in Florida just to be able to put food on the table. So if I hadn't had those skills as a framing carpenter, I wouldn't be able to do that. I've been sitting at home, dialing numbers to, back then it was dialing, but dialing numbers for, job interviews. So I'm a big believer in everyone learning a trade and learning how to work that way. If nothing else, it helps you relate to people who are in that socioeconomic level, the blue collar level. I think there's a lot of dignity and nobility there that sometimes people that only experience white collar type jobs, tend to look down on. And, in this culture, the majority of the people are, they're farm workers and blue collar workers. And, they need to know that they put their pants on just like everybody else, So to me, that's a part of training them in those values of reflecting a godly man in our culture here.
Let's say I have another dream for the project, and then currently we sit amongst the coffee plants out there on the land that we own, and being in the region of the highest coffee production in Honduras is motivation for me to see some kind of certification, some kind of deep real education for how they interact with those plants, because the majority of them are doing that during their vacation time. They're cutting those coffee beans, and it'd be cool to see the project giving them that capacity to be leaders in that industry, the very least leaders in their community, and helping to see that the real flourishing of those plants in their areas.
Yeah, you and I haven't talked about that before. I'm glad to hear you saying that. We have actually, priced out at different times a budget for going about doing that, and there's a lot of facets. Most people who drink coffee in the world don't really understand how complicated and multifaceted getting a good quality bean into your grinder at home in the United States. More people are aware of it now just because of YouTube and everything, but we actually have the right person to help us. We have a consultant, Eddie Sarmiento, and he is SCA is the Specialty Coffee Association. It's the best and worldwide. He has the highest certification for training. He actually certifies all the other levels. And there's a certification for cupping, which is one of the lower levels, but it takes some training. There's a certification for evaluating and grading the green bean, he has the certification to certify all those levels. So it's an incredible asset, and he's right here. He's already working with us on a consulting basis. So we've talked about setting up a lab, with the espresso machines and all the other roasters and all the other things that we need as a way of training our boys and giving access to them. And then there's the certifications on the farm level, knowing what to do, how to diagnose plagues, and how to read and understand soil analysis to decide what needs to be done. And the Honduran government it's a quasi-governmental organization called ICAFE, and it's what we would call like county extension service. So they make that available, but you still have to understand all that and know that. So we really would be missing a good opportunity not to act on that, having Eddie as a resource. And yeah, we have altogether, the Moses Project has 32 manzanas, which is about, it's close to 60 acres of coffee in production. So, and they live right there in the middle of it. So it would be a great thing for us to do, and probably not that we need some money. Seems like everything we want to do, we have to have new funding for it, but it's really not that much funding to get us there, I don't think.
Great. Donna, as the mother of these boys, by extension, at the very least, grandmother perhaps, my primary advice giver whenever we have our chances to talk about situations. What's your perspective as the overseer of the project?
I consider what we are doing at Project Moses to be one of the most valuable things we do at Mission Upreach. When you get involved, like you are and like I try to be with the boys, you begin to see each individual as a soul, and you know that God has placed them here. And is giving them this opportunity. And it's pretty weighty for us. It feels like a big responsibility. And it is. I love my relationship with the boys. It fills a hole in my heart. And it is an honor, to do whatever I can in a motherly, grandmotherly role. Administratively, it does fall under my purview, and it's a joy for me right now because you're managing, you are the director along with Francis, and you guys are doing an amazing job. We haven't always had the same level of detail and attention. The integrative approach to the boys. So we're not just giving them an opportunity to study and get an education. We're training them in the Bible, but you're discipling them. You're one-on-one time with them. They have their English classes, obviously, and that's so beneficial. They're growing a garden and they're learning about gardening. They have responsibilities. Nobody's following up behind them, washing their clothes and cleaning their bathrooms. So they're learning how to be responsible. I just think it's a beautiful approach to a holistic environment. But the thing that really moves me the most is your intentional development of the family concept. We're a family, and they are brothers. And I think that's really, really, really important because it mimics what God intended for His church, is for us to function as a family. And of course, as you know, some of these boys, they're little when they come, 12 years old. And as a mother, I don't know that I would let go of my 12-year-old. But their circumstances are different, and it is for their good that they're there. They miss their moms, they miss their dads, they miss their families. And so I think my approach or my involvement is really more on the emotional level, the trying to be a nurturer in their lives and trying to communicate how important they are to me and to Phil.
I definitely see your assistance on that emotional side, because if I'm in the weeds, I'm in the rigidity, I'm in the discipline, and it's always a good pause every week when we have a chance to meet and a chance to talk about the reality of that, the reality of them leaving their families. And I take that weight fairly significantly for my experience with foster care, which God has blessed me with the story that kind of led me to this role, that I think is timely, as God does it as a providence. And just to be their advocate, but as well as be their disciplinarian is definitely a balance. And I do appreciate the significance of your role being amongst them as well. And I think it's one of our benefits of having Mission Upreach as a backer to Project Moses is we have lots of resources, lots of individuals, not even just through the church, because the church is a natural form, the organic form of having that care and that extended family. But the mission itself has been integral for allowing us just to touch each aspect of those boys' lives.
Yeah, I thought of this when you asked me about the history of the project, and my response was, it's so cool to be a part of something God clearly began. He probably had it in mind at the foundation of the world, but clearly 20 plus years ago when Phil Davidson and Tim and others had the vision of establishing the project the way we know it. And Don and I have said to each other over and over again that we believe that's the case with you. Your unique experiences and background, the fact you grew up with your dad working in campus ministry, you were an athlete, you were part of FCA, all those things, clearly God is using right now to form these young men into the men that God wants them to be. So, we give thanks to God and credit to God. We just feel we're humbled. We're like, this is so cool that we get to be a part of it. And, the project, we've had several directors and just never quite could get to where we are now. And it wasn't because we didn't visualize it or make efforts at doing it, but God's timing is perfect, and you stepped in when we had a vacancy in the role, and that it's so clearly in our minds a God thing. So we appreciate your leadership and Elsie supporting you, and Lissy and Eli being out there. They're the little brother and sister of the boys. It's clear they really enjoy that family interaction with you guys. So,
if I can speak for you guys in this moment as well, my vision for the project going forward is obviously get ourselves at full capacity, get ourselves to an institutional level on a number of things, but as you said, we don't want to lose that true discipleship that happens in that familial environment. That can happen if we get too big or focus on too much of those institutional things. Sports, are a big part of my history, my character development. I'd like to apply that to the boys so they have that chance as well to see that character formation. But then the academics, we have Bible class, obviously the garden, all those aspects of the project, and I hope we grow vocationally to add more capacity, add more chances for other boys that aren't necessarily selected because of their academic, not inability, but just their lack of opportunity previously, but give them opportunities that are more encapsulated in what their abilities are and what their futures could be. Thank you guys for sitting down and talking.
Yeah, well, thank you.